I hit her up an email and say, I want to play polo. She's like, great, I got a clinic. I come out. I'm on this horse. Can barely ride that horse, but I'm hooked.
That was polo player Dale Johnson. Welcome to Storied San Francisco. I'm your host, Jeff Hunt. Quick reminder that tonight, Michelle will join 7 other photographers in an actual live art show called 214. Photographs will be projected on a large wall outside 63 Bluxom Street Gallery, and local brewery will serve food and drinks. The show starts around 6:45 with an opening band and runs until 10:30. Again, this will be at 63 Bluxom Street in the South of Market neighborhood. Back to the podcast. In this episode, Dale picks up where he left off in part 1. He moved around a bit after college before returning to San Francisco to be with the woman who is now his wife. He got a job that had him travel to Argentina, where a pair of boots led to his discovery and love of polo. Dale ends this podcast telling us about his involvement in Heels Down, Fists Up, a Bay Area equestrian protest group that formed this summer after the murder of George Floyd. Here's Dale.
I've always loved horses, but I didn't really seriously start riding until almost 3 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Can we then wait? Because there's a little bit to fill in.
Absolutely.
If I may keep this a little bit chronological.
Absolutely.
You said your good student years carried on into college.
Absolutely.
Where did you go to college?
Santa Clara University.
Okay, so not
like
too far.
Yeah, like a good Catholic student. I ended up going back to Catholic school for high school, and then ended up going to a Jesuit university.
Okay.
So I ended up going to school. I did apply a little bit back east. I've always wanted to go back east. Mm-hmm. But my mother, after my parents had split, my mom was sick.
Okay.
She'd actually had a number of sort of gastrointestinal issues that were really bad. And my sister was older, so she'd moved out. And so I didn't want to be too far from my mother.
Right.
So a couple things. Santa Clara, they were very generous in terms of the sort of academic sort of scholarships and things like that they were giving. That was one.
Okay.
And two, I wanted to be close to my mother to make sure that she was sound.
Right.
She was sound. So my desire and to live on the East Coast and be there one day has not sort of gone, but
Okay.
in time.
Right.
But I think I made the right decision to stay close to my mom.
Were you able to stay at home, or did you move down?
She definitely wanted me to go to the live in the dorms and things
Okay.
like that. So
Okay.
yeah. So
And like a 4-ish year experience, or
5, in fact.
5? Okay.
So I did 5 because I got 2 degrees.
Okay.
Yeah. So my first degree was actually in history. And I focused largely in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I focused in looking at economic development and political development in post-colonial societies.
Okay.
So understanding the impacts and effects of colonialization on those places.
Right.
And understanding why the current consequences are what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But then also understanding sort of like resource extraction and things like that, and how that actually sort of played into the sort of total global economy, which fascinated me, which is why I kind of went into shipping and wanted to kind of go into banking a little bit as well, which is kind of, I've touched on a little of those in my career.
Yeah. And a minor in family history, like you said.
Absolutely, with a minor in family history. It's actually still ongoing.
Can we talk about your I don't know that I've ever known anyone who's worked in shipping.
Yeah.
Let's hear about that.
Yeah, okay, so I had gotten my first degree in history, and I actually had a major in economics, but I was a few credits from just getting another sort of my bachelor's of science in economics. So economic theory with a focus largely in like statistics and sort of analysis and stuff like that. So statistical analysis, excuse me. And at that point, it was 2008. There was a recession.
Yes.
And that's actually another big reason why I stayed another year. I was like, let me get this second degree and see how things play out. I also took that year to apply to a bunch of jobs. Originally, like I said, I wanted to be a banker. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, all those had fallen through because all the banks were in hot water. Yes. And so, there was a huge company when I was growing up called APL, American President's Lines, in Oakland. And I'd always also, beyond banking, I'd always been fascinated by the global economy And so shipping was like, I could go into shipping. I think that's pretty neat. And so I ended up applying for a sort of a mentorship program, a management trainee program there. Okay. And so I had the option to go back east to do sales, or I could move down to Los Angeles and work on the ships.
Long Beach?
Long Beach.
Long Beach.
Port of LA, Port of Long Beach. So they're like a sister complex. So
okay.
They're adjacent to each other. They just sit in the different cities.
Biggest on the West Coast.
Largest on the West Coast. Largest in the country.
In the country.
I believe so, yeah.
And Oakland, I think on the West is second or third.
Oakland's the second, yeah. But I mean, some of them are measured by size and volume. So you would have to say that LA is number 1 overall. Oakland is number 2 on the West Coast, because when you consider New York, it's a larger port of entry in terms of volume.
Right.
So Oakland probably falls number 3 or 4-ish, I think, in the country. I can't recall.
It.
Yeah.
So you're like, take me to the biggest and baddest. Let's do it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So the biggest and baddest. So I had the opportunity right out of college to work in the biggest, most badass port.
Okay.
In the country.
How was that?
It was fascinating.
What did you do?
I was what you call a superintendent.
Okay.
So a superintendent basically is to oversee the operations of the loading and offloading of cargo ships onto trucks and trains, and working with the crews on board those ships to make sure that the offloading and onloading happen safely, mm-hmm. and to make sure that that ship gets out on time. Mm-hmm. I got to do some fascinating things. I got to go talk to engineers. It's about the engines and the engines rooms, and when they were having issues, got to learn about all the bunker fuel and things like that they use to run those ships. It is very dirty, and we should probably find some alternatives. Just want to throw that in there. Yes. And got to just I got to create a sort of an operational schematic for how to load these special types of containers. So I created that for the company. That was really cool.
Wow.
I got to ballast ships.
Okay.
That's moving the water below decks to actually make sure that the ship was balanced.
Yeah. That it doesn't keel?
Yeah, keel over. There you go. So
one boat term.
I have dined with sea captains.
Yes.
I have, it is great. So it is definitely.
You've knocked on their peg legs and all
absolutely.
That. Yeah.
Flapped their eye patches,
Serious question though, did you ever go on any of the voyages?
Unfortunately not. Okay. So the closest thing I ever got was that they'd forgotten me on one of the, I was actually on the ship.
Okay.
And they were lifting up the gangplank, they'd thrown the lines, and you felt the whole ship just kind of bounce in the water and went very buoyant. Yeah. And I was like, oh my, and ran out of the first mate's quarters and got to the gangplank as they were kind of lifting it up, and then they were able to kind of just hover it over the dock, and I was able to jump off and onto.
You Indiana Jones'd off the boat.
I do a lot of Indiana Jones stuff. I do all my own stunts.
Right, we haven't even got to horses.
Right, exactly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you said "oh my." I think mine might have been a little more explicit language than that.
I'm trying to keep it PG-13. So I worked on a dock. I worked with literal sailors. Yes. So I've got a mouth, but I try to keep it clean.
Okay, that's your call.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've worked in a few places. So I've worked for shipping companies. I've managed container routes throughout the world. I have managed container routes domestically. And then I ended up working for a retailer. I worked for the Gap for a while. Mm-hmm. Ended up designing one of their tracking systems for all of the inventory moving around the world. So I did that in the global supply chain world. And actually, that's actually how I moved into data and data engineering. So I moved directly from sort of in operations, if you will, and understanding operation to data. And so when I was working in shipping, they had abysmal data. They did not know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I got into really you could automate some stuff. You could, and that's when I really started getting into coding. Mm-hmm. And I actually did it just out of the fact that I wanted things to be more accurate. Mm-hmm. And also I'm a little lazy, and I just like to have my days. I want the machine to do it for me so I can spend my days riding horses or watching TV or whatever it is.
I'm going to go ahead and call that a good use of machines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Yeah. So when did you move to the city then? You want to talk about that? When and why and what context?
Yeah, I will definitely talk about that a little bit. So at the time I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona. That shipping company had moved their offices, sort of the logistics office or wherever it was you want to call it, down to Scottsdale, Arizona from Oakland. Scottsdale's awesome. I actually lived in extreme North Scottsdale too, like Pinnacle Peak area. So it was like near the desert.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was beautiful. It was quiet.
Beautiful.
And so it was definitely sort of the polar opposite of what I've gotten growing up in Oakland, being in San Francisco a lot with my family on both sides of the bay. Mm-hmm. And so it was nice to just get away and be in the quiet.
Okay.
And so I enjoyed that. So I was working that job, sort of helping understanding the marginal cost of moving another container on a route throughout the world. That's basically the job that I did.
Got it.
Okay, so now that we're there, and we call that the MAR at the time, and so my girlfriend at the time, who ended up becoming my fiance and is now my wife, her father, she was caring for her father back in San Francisco.
Okay.
And unfortunately, due to complications from diabetes, he ended up taking very ill and dying.
Okay.
And he was in his 80s, so he's quite old.
Was she with you in Arizona?
She was not.
Okay.
So we were doing long distance. And so we were just kind of making that work. And then we did that for about 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And so when he died, my fiance or now wife at the time was in college at San Francisco State, your alma mater. And he'd left her, his estate, property and stuff like that. And so that was a lot for her to take care of, to take on as a student. Her student job wasn't going to cover it.
Right.
So I was making some money, and so I decided, I could take a shipping job here up in the Bay Area. So I left APL to Matson.
Okay.
And so Matson is a very well-known Bay Area company.
That one, yeah.
Filoli down the street from here was built by the Matson family. Well, no, it actually was owned by the Matson family. It was built by a German chocolatier, but Lurleen Matson Roth, who was also very she had a huge hand in the Bay Area equestrian community at some time. She lived at Filoli, and she was a Matson, so I ended up working at Matson. So I took a job at Matson, took a little bit of a pay cut, took a huge tax increase, moved back to California, and decided to sort of help my wife take care of all of those things and make sure that she was set up to finish school.
And that move was back to live in San Francisco?
Yeah, so the house that, her father had owned and where she was living at the time was in San Francisco.
In the Ingleside, you said?
In Ingleside.
Okay, and that's where you live today?
Yep, we still are there.
What year was that you came back?
2010.
Okay, so you've been back 10 years.
10 years.
Okay, I guess congratulations.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that at all?
I being here in San Francisco and things like that, I love it. It's an awesome city. But, I'd like to see, being in Arizona and stuff, I'd like to see a little bit more of the country eventually.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So
and that makes sense.
Yeah, so we'll see.
With what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about horses.
Yep,
How did that happen?
Okay. To your point about me being like, San Francisco, I wanted a job where I could travel, see the world. And I ended up joining on with the Dutch fintech Ingenico e-payments that allowed me to travel between their headquarters in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And then my boss at the time, he's Argentine, so he said in Buenos Aires. And so it was great. So I could, from time to time go between San Francisco, the Netherlands, and Buenos Aires.
Had you been to Buenos Aires before?
I had never been.
One of my favorite
places
I've been. I love it.
Here's how the stars kind of align. So I actually learned all about Argentine economy and politics in college at Santa Clara because one of my favorite professors, his name is Father Arthur Liebscher. He's a Jesuit there. He was all about focusing on Argentine politics and things like that. And I actually ended up getting my economics degree largely because of my fascination about what happened in Argentina.
Isn't it kind of still happening-ish, or?
Yeah, so there's definitely like fallout from policies that happened decades ago. Right. And there are people who still, I think, want to continue said policies, and then there's kind of this push and pull in Argentina where a lot of people want things to change, but then you've built sort of this state that's kind of been set up largely like by the Peronists about how, these very generous social programs, but then the question now is, how do you pay for all of these very generous social programs? You do need a thriving private sector and a tax base to make that happen. So I think the problem is in response to the inequality that existed in Argentina before the proness, which was fair, the pendulum probably swung too far. Right. And so that's kind of what you kind of see some of the fallout today. So I believe Christina, I think Kirchner is now the president, and she's sort of a modern day Peronist. And I was there right when the election was happening back in November. Because I was on a polo holiday, as I mentioned, on our walkover. But yeah, back to the job. So basically, so I'd taken a job. So I in college, I learned about Argentina, loved it. And so, this is a place I'd want to get to one day. And all of a sudden, I had this opportunity. I'm interviewing with this Argentine guy, Argentine guy on the phone. He ends up being my boss. And a few months later, I ended up going to Argentina. Right. And to the point, like, my grandfather had always been involved with horses. The horses had always kind of been there in the periphery, kind of in my family. I loved them. But then when I got down to Argentina, I was in a leather goods shop buying, I believe, some things for my mom, a scarf or something like that. She told me to bring her something back. And I look up and I see an awesome pair of boots. So you'll always see me in a pair of boots because I just love boots. I love them. And
it's also your Texas roots.
It's probably a little bit of the Texas in me. I wear boots everywhere now. It doesn't matter. I see a pair of beautiful polo boots up top, and I said, I was like, what is that for? And then the shop keeps like, Polo. And I'm like, shit, I got to get into polo because those boots are badass, right? So
that was your calling.
Yeah, it was my calling. It was just a pair of boots. Those boots are badass. So a few months later, I get on I actually look it up. I'm like, polo in the Bay Area, and I learned that there's a polo clinic, and Francesca Fanato, who runs South Bay Polo Club down in Gilroy, it's my home club now, basically, and it's where I play, and have found so many friends and people I kind of consider family now. I hit her up an email and say, I want to play polo. She's like, great, I got a clinic. I come out, I'm on this horse, can barely ride that horse, but I'm hooked. I'm like, I gotta play this. So one part of it was proving it to myself that I could ride this horse and hit the ball ball with the mallet, because I didn't want to embarrass myself. Get out there and you drop, $1,200 on this clinic, and you don't have anything to speak for it about. Right. So nothing to show for it. So that's really how I got into it. I saw a pair of boots in a shop in Argentina. Came back, started playing polo.
And so is that? There's the clinic. Is there like an amateur? Is it a league, or is it just like you guys just get together?
It's a club, really.
A club.
Yeah. So it would be a club where a couple of your friends and stuff get together, and you guys would assign teams, almost like pick up basketball, if you will. Like if you guys were like, hey, pick up basketball every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. These are the same people. We're going to switch up the teams every time. We got some really good players here we're going to throw on the teams with some of the beginner players, and this is how we're going to do it. That's kind of basically how the club is. Now, we do have official tournaments where it's a little more like formal, and you'll have people from different clubs coming out from all around sort of the region. But usually on a weekday, like I play Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Usually it's just people from the club.
Right. Do you guys... Pardon my ignorance in all this, but it's like, do you wear certain clothes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like a uniform?
Yeah. Polo, there's definitely a uniform. So on Thursdays, it's actually a little more
It's not ever shirts versus skins?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
What about, like, hats?
We have helmets. So I brought all my equipment so that we could take a look at it, too. So in polo, there are a few things that we do wear. So we wear polo whites, and polo whites are the white pants that you usually see polo players wear as characteristic. And then we have a jersey. So usually it could be a polo shirt. It could be something like a lycra jersey, something a little more modern that you kind of see nowadays. And that's it. So then on top of that, we always wear boots. So I brought my polo boots just in case.
Nice.
Not my cowboy boots. And then we wear basically knee pads because we have ride-offs. And a ride-off is basically you got two horses running up against each other, and you've got to run one horse into the other horse. So you got to protect those knees, right? That also protects your knees from the ball too. So just in case your ball hits your kneecap or something like
That wouldn't feel good.
It would not feel good. And you'll see the ball in just a second. It's this like condensed plastic thing, and you hit that thing, it can break your cheek. It could break a lot of things.
Is it more or less soccer-ish rules, like as far as, you get the ball down into the thing?
So
football, soccer, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of. So I would say it's a combination there of like hockey almost.
Okay.
There's no goalie in polo. So
right.
I'll just break it down to you very simply. Yeah. So polo is 4-on-4. Mm-hmm. So let's just talk about an official polo match. 4-on-4, and then you've got 2 umps on the field. Mm-hmm. 9 football fields, and we meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And obviously one team's going one way, the other team's going the other way. So basically they do a throw in, whoever gets that ball and knocks that ball toward the goal, that creates a line. So imagine that you've seen a polo shirt and you see that famous person doing the polo swing.
Yes.
So imagine they hit that ball straight up the field.
Okay.
That creates a line. Mm-hmm. And now that you've got to play to that line.
Oh.
So I hit that line, or I hit that ball and create that line. So there's a few things that the opposing team can do. Mm-hmm. The opposing player can actually run up beside the other player and do a ride-off, which I just mentioned, which is actually get their horse up and bump them out of the way. And what we like to call take the line of the ball.
It's like a Star Wars move, kind of.
It is, yeah.
Bikes,
oh, yeah, on the little bikes thing.
It
is like that. They took that from us.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yes. Credit where it's due.
I know. They gotta, give us a little credit here. We're tired of polo being in the background. We need to bring it to the foreground.
And that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, we don't want it to be the background of Pretty Woman anymore.
No.
We should just have Polo Woman or something. I don't know. So, but anyway. So you create that line, you can bump it, and the person can take that ball. They can turn that ball or whatever it is that they want to do, or whatever defensive move. Or if I'm running up alongside that player that created that line, I can actually take my mallet, and as they go to swing again, I can take that mallet and slap it back down. Boom. That's what we call a hook. You can hook their mallet.
You get their mallet?
So basically,
with yours?
They're still holding on to it, but you can hook their mallet and prevent them from swinging.
Oh, shit.
And then those 2 players would run off, and then hopefully the players behind you would be able to take the ball. Right. However, right?
Oh my God.
Another move that you could do is you could back that ball too, right? Okay. So you could basically you bump them out of the way. The first scenario I talked about is like you can take the line, you can turn the ball, but most likely what would happen is the person would bump that person out of the way, take the line, and back the ball. And they would back that ball back to their teammates who are maybe waiting there.
That's crazy.
Right. And so that teammate can then take that ball back to the field to play the other goal.
Wow.
Right.
Is the goal a line, or is it like a net?
It's just like two big poles standing there.
And you hit it between.
Yeah, you hit it between the goals. Yeah. So
that's fascinating. I need to watch some videos.
Yeah. So
watch you guys. Watch you guys play.
Well, Global Polo TV actually there's a really cool app, and that's all free, and you can watch some really cool polo there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Can we wrap up with, unless you have anything else that you want to talk about, heels down, fists up?
Absolutely.
Because that essentially is how we're here.
Right. Exactly.
Through your connection with Liz.
Yeah. So basically, what ended up happening after the murder of George Floyd. I think, like everyone else in the country, I was flabbergasted, and I'll be honest. I'm pretty stoic to a lot of things. I think I've had my fair share because I put it like this: I've seen both sides of the coin. I've definitely been stopped and frisked by a police officer, but then I've also been in my neighborhood, and I've actually been a victim of gun violence in my neighborhood too. Right. In sort of an attempted robbery. And they shot out the car windows and stuff. It was a really interesting experience. And so I think for me, kind of sitting in the middle of this huge debate, it just made me so sad. And I think that like so many people, they didn't know how to react to this event because it was truly terrible. Right. It was truly terrible. And we kind of talked about some things like when you're kind of feeling helpless and things like that. We talked about 9/11 earlier in our discussion, and that's how you felt when you watched that video. You felt so helpless for that dude. Yeah. And in my opinion, it didn't matter. I know that some people try to bring in what he'd done in the past and things like that. It didn't matter. It does not matter at the end of the day. Right. Right. And so when I saw the demonstrations throughout the country, and as it started to gravitate and be demonstrations throughout the world, and where this term Black Lives Matter, which at one point was an object of scorn, and for so many people it is, and I think poorly associated with all of these other things I don't think it should be with, it becomes sort of this rallying cry. It was very beautiful for me. And I think that when I saw Breonna Noble make her gesture, it was amazing to see this young, beautiful sort of Black woman from Oakland, equestrian, you know, make this very symbolic gesture.
So you saw her in the Oakland
I saw her in the media.
The news. But from that, right?
Yeah, from that protest. And it just resonated so deeply with me.
Right.
And I thought, what a fabulous and fantastic and beautiful gesture for this woman to do this, you know. And I mean, and you think about it, Breonna just wanted to make her voice heard. What a lot of people don't know is her sister sits on the San Francisco Police Department. You know, I mean, my mom was a sheriff. Like, it's not so black and white you see throughout the country for people, right? So, I mean, we've got families in law enforcement, you know, stuff like that. But I think that you can still see that there are certain inequities, and I think that you can still call them out, and I think that you can put a label to it. And you can't just say that this person's this because this is what they stand for, what they believe. Right. And so I saw that, and I had a bunch of people reach out, and they were like, "Oh man, would you do that with your horse?" And I'm like, "Man," I was like, "Well, Sunny's pretty bomb-proof." I was like, "You gotta have a bomb-proof horse to do that." And it was really funny because Breonna didn't eventually put out like a thing. Like, I was there a few hours early before the major part of the protest. Dapper Dan is, you know, bomb-proof, but Dapper obviously can't be in a crowd of throngs of thousands of people, but the gesture nonetheless was absolutely amazing. So Breonna had actually reached out and sort of through her social media to equestrians throughout the area to kind of pose in pictures and do something just as symbolic. So I was here on the ranch one day and had a picture of me taken doing the same thing and just mentioned the heels down, fists up. And when they said that they were going to do one of their rides in Marin County, I decided to join up and do it. I thought that, you know, kind of coming together in solidarity and something peaceful would have been something I think my grandparents would have appreciated. Right. I think that my family appreciates it. And I think that there are so many people in my community, definitely back home from Oakland, who appreciate it. And it's nice to kind of put your voice out there and be on something as powerful and as symbolic as a horse. I think that no matter who you are, what walk of life, or what your background is, horses hold a special fascination for humans. Absolutely. I mean, they've just been sort of our partners, like dogs and cats and things like that. They've been our partners for thousands of years. Right. And there's just something about them. They just have a sort of gravitas, if to say.
Yeah, I love that word.
Yeah.
Well, like you, the first time I saw her was the Oakland protest. The second time I saw her, I believe, is what you're talking about in Marin. And to me, like, at that point, I don't know that I had heard her talk or seen words or read words written about her. But to me, it's the sight. Right. In the Marin thing, it was like it was just so beautiful and powerful. Right. How was it to be part of?
You know, that was really fun. It was great to see equestrians from all over the place, from a variety of disciplines. It was great to represent polo there, because I think I was the only polo representation. There aren't a lot of us, so that makes sense. Right. There are a lot of Western and English and things like that. So to be a part of that and to just ride with Breonna, this very powerful figure and just a great person all around, was amazing. And it was good for Sunny and me to do that. And there was just this conviction when I saw it pop up. I think it was on Facebook. I just said that I had to be there, that I had to say something. I had to do something. It's difficult to want to do something and not be able to.
That was Dale Johnson. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, we'll get to know Tami Adamalukun. Join us for episode 38 next Tuesday. And don't forget Michelle's photo show tonight from 6:45 to 10:30 at 63 Bluxom Street in San Francisco. Music for Storied San Francisco is by Otis McDonald. Photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. The show is hosted and produced by me. Michelle and I have produced more than 130 episodes over the last 3 years, and you can find them all at our website, storiedsf.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can like, comment, and share the stuff we put out. Find the podcast just about everywhere you can listen, including, most recently, BFF.FM's new podcast network. Please subscribe to stay up to date on all the content we publish. We love feedback, so if you have any, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay healthy.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.